All right, welcome to FFA Today, episode number 7. Bobby Fenton here, your host with you as we record on a Wednesday night, January 22nd. We've had a good run of visiting Tijuana Flats around the area. We're back at One Game Day Place tonight where we belong. I am joined, of course, by two good friends, two guys you've heard on the show before, the head coach of the Dunedin Pirates, Nate Barlow. Coach, how you doing?
What's up? Doing good.
And of course, the guy who makes the FFA go, who wears more hats than anybody in this league, both the owner of the Dunedin Pirates, player of the Dunedin Pirates, pretty much an administrator in the FFA as well, although not with a conflict of interest, of course. Andy Villamarzo. Andy, how are you?
God, I'm tired just even hearing all those things.
Well, I mean, like I said, people are going to go, wait a minute, this guy's on a team and he's been in administration too. That's not what I meant. I just meant that you do a lot of things to make the league go. There's no funny business or anything like that.
Well, Andy used to do all those things and actually run an entire league.
Right.
Which is incredible. Which I think the guy lost a couple years of life doing that. I'm not going to lie.
Well, every year he comes back, though, because I remember a couple years ago, and this kind of toward the end of the year, and I was, I'm already too old to play, but I was less old then. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm done after this. And then he's like, yeah, man, I don't know, me too, probably. It's probably it. And we're kind of staying on the sidelines. There's fourth quarter or some blowout or something. And then, of course, the next season we're both back. He's not just back, but doing more than he's done.
Right.
So.
Exactly. I think that's a lot. That resonates with a lot of players and owners, where especially if you have like a tough season or a tough few seasons or whatever. It's like, man, I can't keep doing this, and then it's like, man, it's like a drug, man. You just have to have it. It's
time
crazy.
off, and you're all of a sudden you're like, I'll play again. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there were how many 3 years there in between where there was no operations for the Pirates?
Yeah, it was, 2015, 2016, which I did contemplate in those years, possibly doing it.
Of course you did.
And we visited a game, me and the coach and our, great friend Rodney. We went out and watched the Tampa Bay Patriots play the Gladiators over at the Tampa Power Field. And that kind of got the juices going. It was like, man, watching these two great teams, anytime I'm around football, it's like, I get that,
Right, it's
like,
hard not to.
True.
I'd have to eliminate football to almost say I'm done with it. But I don't think I can.
That's not going to happen.
True.
Yeah. So we got a lot to get to. It's been a couple of weeks since our last show. A lot has happened. There's been a host of preseason games between FFA teams as well as some bowl games with teams on the FFA going up against teams on a national level from all over the place. And, of course, we got the kickoff classics this weekend. Gasparilla weekend, there'll be 2 games. Everybody else gets going the Saturday after that. So we got a lot to get to on the show today. Oh, the power rankings, I forgot. We'll cover those as well. So let's talk about, first of all, these bowl games because there were a couple of games, like I said, between FFA teams, which we'll get to in a minute, but there were also a couple of games with our, some of our better teams in the league going up against outside teams, and the big surprise was obviously the Southwest Florida Gladiators, who never really seemed to lose to anybody that I know of.
I don't think they've lost in the last 2 years.
Right, hadn't lost in the last 2 years, won league championships and all that. They play a team called the North Carolina Rebels in what is known as, I guess it was the 3A FNT Winter Spring National Championship. They lose 40-14 to this team. So you guys have had a chance to see some of that film, right?
Yes.
Because I saw the score and I'm thinking, wait a minute, like either the Gladiators,
wrong.
I'm like, are they themselves? Maybe they're a different Gladiators team this year, or this team from North Carolina is just unbelievable. What happened in that game? Is it a little bit of both? Were guys missing?
Yeah, I think that Rebels team really just came to play. I think they were probably tired of hearing how good the Gladiators were and how they hadn't lost the game in 2 years, and they really controlled the line of scrimmage. And if you ever watch the Gladiators play, that's their game.
That's their domain, man.
That's their domain. They win the line of scrimmage usually, 9.8 out of 10 times. Yeah. And they're able to impose their will on teams. And against the Rebels, man, they just really couldn't. They couldn't get anything going. It seemed like they were a little out of rhythm on offense. I think they were missing a guy or two, a quarterback. They didn't look like they had their starting quarterback. And I know, if I didn't have my starting quarterback and I had to play with, let's say, a receiver at quarterback, the offense just maybe doesn't work quite as well because the wide receiver isn't getting that many reps in practice.
Yeah.
So, you have to take that into account, but I don't think those guys are making any excuses. They're taking it on the chin.
Oh, no, they wouldn't. That's not their style.
They're taking it on the chin, and I think that's what champions do. They take it on the chin, and they move forward with it. But, yeah, line of scrimmage battle, they lost.
Wow, and it's impressive. I mean, hats off to the North Carolina team. I don't know a lot about them, but obviously that's a huge feather in their cap. Raise your hand if, for any reason, you think this means that the Gladiators can all of a sudden are they going back to the pack or something like that? I don't see any hands raised around here. I expect a great effort. I think somebody even said it on Facebook, like is it Space Coast they play in the opener, I think?
Yes, this weekend.
And not that Space Coast can't win the game. That's one of the classics. But, yeah, if I was Space Coast, I would prefer to have had them win their bowl game leading into our game. You never want to have a team coming off a loss like that. So I don't think it bodes well. But, again, I haven't seen Space Coast play either. So.
But it shows Space Coast that they're human.
Yeah.
They can be beat. I think it shows the whole league that. But, listen, I'm not going to be fooled into thinking that the Glads are like some peasant team. They're still a powerhouse. And I think if, they play anybody at 100% strength in the country, they give them a game. Yeah. And just Saturday won their day. Yeah. Or Sunday. I think they played on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday won their day, man.
Well, we'll find out. It counts, but it doesn't count as far as the FFA standings go. And now we'll play for real starting on Saturday. Be interested to see that game against Space Coast, and we'll talk about that more later on in the show. There was also the West Coast Soldiers, who are also in our division, and they took on a team from Connecticut, the Brawlers, in what was known as Tangerine Bowl 9. They win that game 21-0. Again, probably more of an expected result. I don't know a lot about Connecticut, but that's something I would have probably said, yeah, that makes sense.
It looked like that game was, right before halftime. It was a very close game. It was 7-0. It looked like the Soldiers were apparently going to take a knee right there before the half, and then they hit on a trick play. Quentin Burst right up the sideline gets wide open, and Connecticut looked like they were caught off guard, thought they were going to take a knee, and when you don't and you get caught like that, a 2-touchdown lead is obviously, for them, it looked like a very hard, insurmountable, advantage to overcome. So the Soldiers, I think, for the most part, just dominated. They were without their quarterback as well, Nick
Both
Martino.
Of them, first and second string.
Oh, wow. So, okay. Hard to get, like you said. I mean, you can't really take too much from that. No, they won the game anyway, but...
Well, they actually played the game with another organization's quarterback, the Grizzlies, from Georgia.
Yeah, we played last year.
The guy is a good player, man. I mean, he could chuck that ball deep better than anybody I've seen in semi-pro, maybe outside Brian Kessling, but that guy can sling it deep, and they did it early and often, and they did it a bunch, and I really was super impressed by their win, considering you don't have your quarterback, which is one of your, if not your best player.
Right,
and then your second string guy, in which I saw play a little bit against the Reapers, who's a wide receiver, but he's electric, man. Maybe one of the fastest guys I've seen in quite a few years now. That guy got a throwback pass, was going to throw it and turn field and took it to the house for a 50-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
So you're talking about two of your better players on offense and your two number one and number two quarterbacks, and you're playing with a guy from another organization, and you shut a team out. Yep. I mean, listen, all being biased aside, that's impressive.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely impressive, and like we've talked about, it does not get easy. And if you're looking at the FFA power rankings that just came out, the first ones, and again, these are just rankings. These are more for entertainment purposes than anything else. But of course, our show is for entertainment purposes, so it would make sense. You look at our division. Now, I'm not just trying to make this Dunedin-centric, but we are at 12 in the power rankings, which is fair. We got to go out and prove it till we move up.
I don't think it would be wise to put us any higher than that. We got to go out there and prove it.
Got to go out there and prove it. So that's fine. Coming off a couple of seasons that didn't have as many wins as we hoped. But you look at the other three teams in our division, they are the number 1, number 4, and number 5 teams in the power rankings.
Sure.
So, and that's by far the toughest division. We talked before about, what are the toughest divisions? And, you got Magic City and the Miami Chiefs, Southeast Florida also in the top 10. But of the top 5, to have 3 of those teams in our division, and we get right at it with, West Coast coming up next week. It's not going to be easy, man.
Well, I think it's going to be constantly a battling division. And, it kind of reminds me of, like, the SEC, how the SEC rolls. You have all these good teams that are just battling with each other, and you might get an upset here or there, or what might be perceived as an upset.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of times in the SEC you see, and I'm not saying we're a caliber of an SEC team, I'm just saying
but the
division makes sense to me because you're going to have teams just beating up on each other, and that eventually leads to some stuff happening, some wild, crazy stuff happening.
Yeah.
So
it may not be that night, but then a week or two later, it has a cumulative toll.
Right. For instance, like, you play a team and you play them real tough, and it's real. Maybe you don't win the game, but you play 2 or 3 weeks later. Now you have confidence. No, man, we can play with those guys. Right. So I think that's gonna go with all the games, not just our game or the Tar Heels v Gladiators game or whatever. I mean, it's gonna go with all the teams in all divisions, but especially ours.
Yep, and it's like I said, gets right off the bat. We get started. The division games are both this week, the 2 kickoff classics. Like I said, we've got Southwest Florida taking on Space Coast. And what's the other one? Is it the Wolverines?
It's the South Florida Wolverines and the Broward Bulldogs, which is actually a special Sunday 4 p.m. kickoff.
I like that.
Oh, really?
At the Joseph C. Carter Park.
There you go.
I mean, you, Andy, a thing or two about the Bulldogs. I mean, what can you tell us about them, and what can we expect, right, from them playing the league runner-up last year? I mean, let's be honest. A good team.
And this is a brand new team, right? They're not coming from another league. They're from scratch.
Brand new team made up of players from the Broward Barracudas, the Dade County or the now defunct Dade County Raiders, the now, or the some of the Hollywood Browns players, which rumors are afly of what's going on with them. We haven't heard any official announcement from the league in regards to what is actually potential fate, but I do know Daryl Hopper just signed on with their team recently. He's a quarterback we're very familiar with. He's been playing since the days of the Broward County Cowboys back in 2012. He led them to a couple championships. He's been a mainstay with the the Browns, and then now he's going to come over here to the Bulldogs, and I think he brings some veteran leadership, and he brings veteran just knowledge of the game. He can really lead Broward. I've always said they're my dark horse. They're the team I think that they can make some noise here in the South.
So right out of the gate, never having anything. How you guys might know more about this than me. How do brand new teams do compared to established teams? I know it's very hit or miss in semi-pro football. It could go all or nothing, but.
Yeah, I mean, and people were very, I think, kind of criticizing, why would the Bulldogs be ahead of any team that was around last year? How do you know what you're going to get with this team? They could FFA. But we also know a certain team's talented. They're going to bring a caliber of talent. I think from looking at what the Bulldogs have been putting together, the staff is well established. You got a lot of players that have a lot of experience from playing on teams that have been successful. I think we can put that all together and make an equation that they're going to be good. I don't think they're going to be bad. I don't look at them and go,
yeah, what you're saying is true. I mean, it really isn't about how new a team is, because in a sense, I mean, and Dunedin's maybe an exception to this in Southwest Florida. Every year, every team is new. I mean, it might be the same name and the same colors, the same uniforms, but in semi-pro, it's such a transient type of thing that
it is.
I mean, we got guys returning that have been with the team 3-4 years, which is pretty impressive for semi-pro. But most teams, even the ones that are around, they got different quarterback. Every year, it's different.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's different about us than any other year. I could look back and say, man, there's actually 20 guys that started and finished the year.
Yeah.
That are our core guys that we've mixed in with other guys that have come in that really, no one really knows about, which is good for us. And so we get to kind of have that gel and just add to it, which is great. But what I'll say to that is, and this is my perspective on it, is really what you have a lot of times is relatively similar teams. Andy touched on it with the Browns and Cowboys. I think they just had an ownership change. Same coach, same quarterback, same assistants. They ran the same system. So you have everything the same, just the owners are a little different and the team name's different. So, yeah, you have a brand new team, but they're not really a brand new team.
Yeah.
So I think that happens a lot more times than it doesn't.
Yeah, and it makes sense. And looking at Broward, it's not like they're in the top 5 or something, but the FFA Power Rankings have them at 8th. And like I said, Southwest Florida number 1, the Wolverines, the other championship game team last year, number 2. Magic City, again, a mainstay. They're always going to be there, number 3. West Coast 4. Space Coast is one that's very high. And I'll talk about them for a second because they're a team that's new to the league. They're not a new team overall, though. But what prompted them, do you guys think, being that high? Do they have? I don't know a lot about them. They have a pretty good track record from their other leagues they've been in.
Last year, they took a leap. They were able to get into the postseason, and they went, I believe, to the second round. They actually didn't have their quarterback, Matt Parsons, who he's familiar with the FFA. He used to play with the Orlando Rage, and he was a very good quarterback. He's their starter, and he wasn't available in the postseason game they had against the West Coast Soldiers in the second round. It was due to he signed with an arena team, from what I understood, and the rules by the league actually mandated that any player that had signed was no longer. And exactly, it was that gray area there. So they ruled him ineligible for the remainder of the season. They had to roll with a backup. And they ended up losing to the Soldiers, I believe, 46-0. It was just a whitewashing there. And then, he's back, and I think that puts Space Coast. They have to be considered as a contender because from what I remember, they beat the Phantoms at their place last year, but they didn't have Parsons going into the postseason.
Right, that makes a big difference.
It's kind of like not knowing really what that ceiling was with him there because you're playing with your backup. You're sitting there like, this isn't really our guy. We're forced to play with them. And they won their first playoff game, I believe it was against the Central Florida Bulls of Ocala. They won that handily. But you play the Soldiers, you obviously got to have all hands on deck. You got to have every guy available. And they didn't have one of the most important players available to them.
Where are the Chiefs ranked?
Chiefs are ranked right behind Space Coast. So you got 4 West Coast Soldiers, 5 Space Coast, then 6 the Miami Chiefs.
I'm not sure if I agree with that ranking personally. Not that I know a lot about the Chiefs, but I know that they're a league champion. And, and I don't know how difficult or undifficult their league was last year, but they won their league. And they have a lot of talent in South Florida. We talk about it every single time we come on air, and I don't want to overlook them. And I honestly don't agree with that because I think league champions, no matter where you are a league champion, should go above, in my opinion, guys that weren't league champions. Now, I would probably even rank them above the West Coast Soldiers personally, but
the 4 spot there.
But here's the thing about that, though: West Coast Soldiers have done it for longer. They've made championship games. They've lost them, but they've got there.
Yeah, they're consistent, proven where we know their coach and they're solid organizational.
Exactly. So that's apples and oranges right there, honestly. But I don't think that the Tar Heels should be ranked above them. But hey, you never know what can happen. It's a wild west when it starts to get going.
For fun. The thing about our league, it's more like pro sports than college sports. There's standings. It's all formula. No one makes any decisions based on who's going to go to the playoffs. It's all just whatever happens on the field.
Right.
So, we'll have all that going on. I almost wish there was a committee because our strength of schedule would probably put us way near the top no matter what actually happened on the field. Just the computer rankings would love us for the quality of teams we're going to face. But, you don't get any extra credit. You just got to go win games, and that's how it starts. So, you got Miami, and then you go to the Southeast Florida Reapers, then Broward. And then, even the bottom half, you get some decent teams down there with the Duval Raiders have always been. They're a pretty consistent team that's been around. The South Florida Chargers have improved every year. They're younger than there's us. You got Port Orange. St. Augustine did lose their preseason game to somebody. I think it was, I don't remember who it was. I have it here. But
they lost to the Golden Isles.
Golden Isles, who was in the league before. We know them a little bit.
Right. I think they went 10-2 last year or something like that, right?
Yeah, and I know Grant Henderson, the owner with the Crusaders, wasn't especially, wasn't too fond of their, preseason ranking when he saw it. I think he voiced it on the Facebook. But it's like there's 1 through 15. And unfortunately there's going to be some teams at the bottom and there's teams at the top and there's teams in the middle.
Hey, man, that's why we line it up
we got a chance to
on
do
Saturday nights and and we get it on. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be all upset about a 12th ranking. To be honest with you, I would have ranked us at the very bottom.
Yeah. I mean,
and I'm being real.
No.
I'm just keeping it real. I would have ranked us at the very bottom because guess what? I mean, we haven't proved nothing to nobody. It's a new season.
Yeah.
We can't go on the past merits of man, which means we can't go off last year, and we definitely can't go off the preseason. It gives us a little bit of a gauge. It gives us an idea.
Yeah.
But once the bullets start flying, game day, Saturday night, the lights go on, that's when we'll see what's going on. And it's a long season. Your season isn't over after week 1.
Yeah, no, absolutely
right? You
not.
know what I mean?
Especially in this league where, again, it's the standings. It's not like college football where one game knocks you out. You got a chance to make it all up in those next 9 games.
If you think you're better than the next guy, you go out there and prove it week by week, man.
It's going to be fun. What are we looking at for weather? I should have checked the weather, but it should be warmed up a little bit. I mean, the 2 games we're playing, the one's in South Florida. The other one is, where are they playing that other kickoff classic? Is that in Bradenton?
It's Bradenton.
Okay, yeah, it should be pretty okay there by the weekend time. I wanted to ask you, as a head coach, and I've coached a little bit in high school as an assistant. My uncle was a head coach for a long time. I helped him out a couple seasons. But one thing he told me is that in the preseason, when all you've done is practice, I know we had the one preseason game, but basically when all you've done is practice, he's like, no matter what, you always think you're not that good. And he's like, I've had so many years where we went through practice, and I'm trying to envision us playing a real team. And I'm like, man, we are not, we're not what we need to be. We're not good. And then we end up being like an 8-2, 9-1. There was a couple years where they thought they were good, but he said more often than not, a head coach, you don't think you're good. Is that true? Like, I know in semi-pro it's a little bit different, but I mean,
even when I was in high school, I think you always get a sense of how camp is going and how practices are going. And I personally, I constantly have to talk to Rodney and some of my assistant coaches all the time about just focusing on one practice at a time.
Yeah.
And it sounds cliche, it really does, and I get it. But like the reality is that we can't win 10 games at once. We can't have a great practice 10 practices in a row. We can only have a great practice one practice. Yeah, and so I think about things like that. So it's ebbs and flows, right? Sometimes I think, man, I'm frustrated, right? Like, I don't think we're where we need to be. But then, you'll have 2 or 3 really good practices in a row, and you'll be like, man, I feel good. I feel great.
Yeah.
So I think it's honestly ebbs and flows, and it depends on mood and how guys are feeling, and from where we played, and Andy can attest to this as a player, and maybe this didn't happen to him, but he can attest to it as a player. We played that preseason game, and then we took the holidays off, and then we came back to practice on Saturday, and it was monsooning.
Right.
So we couldn't practice. So that's almost, by the time we came back, it was on the 4th week.
Yeah, it was a month.
That is a long time to be away from each other.
Right before the season, especially.
It just is. And there's nothing you can do to replicate that. So, last week I was like biting the nails a little bit.
Yeah, what's it going to be like out here?
But this past week, I think a little bit we started to kind of get it together. And really it's just about ramping it up and getting ready for the Soldiers. And really, that's our main focus is putting a couple good practices together and then going. So I don't know, to answer your question, it's tough. I think sometimes you feel that way. You get nervous, right? You're like, man, we didn't look like we could do anything against anybody right now.
We're gonna be terrible.
You got players hitting you up, coach. I'm nervous about this. I'm nervous about this guy or that guy, or I'm nervous about this, that, or the other. And so it's and on all levels that happens. Guys just, they're nervous, they're jacked up to play a game. So I think you won't know until you get out there. But, I generally have an optimistic attitude towards things. But I'm going to keep it real.
Yeah.
Do I think if we played tomorrow, we're ready? No. Well, we're not ready. We need to focus on tomorrow's practice, put that together, put that behind us, have a good next Thursday practice, rolling into that game, and I'll feel better. But right now, we're not ready to play.
And we got 2, right? Are we going to do Thursday, and then we're on the regular season schedule now, pretty much Thursday, and that's what it's going to be all year now. So
and I moved it to Thursday this week because of Gasparilla.
Right, yeah.
Which I just didn't want any. I remember a couple guys a couple years ago, El Rey and Mubby, who come from
Orlando area,
they were driving through Tampa trying to get to a game.
Oh yeah,
and they were like, man, we didn't. They came like an hour late or something like that to when they were supposed to be there, and they were like, man, what the heck happened? We're just not gonna deal with it, and we're gonna roll out tomorrow, which is gonna be great weather. I think at night it's gonna be like 65 degrees.
Right, yeah, it's gonna be a little warmer. Although here on the back porch right now, it's not too bad. It's warm. This past couple nights in the mornings were really rough.
Oh, they're cold. You coming tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I might be a little late after I get done with all, my son.
I know, we're on a strict schedule tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I'll get there tomorrow. I mean, I'll try and get everything done a lot earlier than I did tonight and get there tomorrow. But yeah, and then during the regular season, like you said, it's a weeknight thing. It's a little bit different. You're under the lights, which aren't always the best quality lights, depending on some of these teams where they practice. And I've been to a bunch of different semi-pro practices. We have a pretty good situation with the way we do things, so that works out pretty well.
Oh, I will say this real quick to add on that. It's ebbs and flows to practices, but it's also about what guys show up to practices, right? If you have, all 50 guys or how many ever we have on a, I don't know, 40 guys on a roster or 35 guys, whatever it is, if they're all there, every single one of them, and you're like, I got this many guys, and then some practices you'll have a guy here missing, a guy there missing, and you start to look around and you start to get a little nervous, but yeah, I mean that goes into it too, I think a little bit.
Yeah, and even at the high school level, any level where everybody's together all the time, like you practice every day, before a game, you yell, kickoff, and 11 guys run right up, stand there,
Right.
All right, punt return, and you just go through it. It's never the same. No matter how much we practice, we practiced it this past weekend, you'll yell it.
Practice it every week?
Yeah, you'll yell it tomorrow night, and it'll be like 7 of the 11 guys. Now, every week you're moving different guys in and out.
Piecing guys in there.
Yeah, and that's just special teams, but it's the same way with, you're starting 22 on offense and defense. That's everybody. It's not just Dunedin. In fact, one of the reasons why I do think we're pretty okay this year, and this is my third year in the last 4. I didn't play last year, but of the 3 years, I mean, part of it's the continuity because I recognize so many faces from those other years. But I mean, I really do feel like this is the best team that we've had since I've been around, which may not be saying a ton because we haven't won a ton of games in 17 and 18. I wasn't around for 19. But this does seem like a real cohesive group, and obviously with you coaching, again, having been here and knowing everybody, it's we have a solid coaching staff. Like everything seems to be in place to make a step. And I'm not making any we're going to be 8-2. I have no idea.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like we're pretty okay.
There's continuity everywhere though, because I think the last 3 years outside the 1 year with Givens is the continuity of the coaching staffs.
Yeah,
you had 2017. You had Murto as the coach, and then I came late.
Yeah.
I came at their preseason game.
I remember that. You came the same time I did.
Literally their preseason game.
Yeah.
And then last year, same thing. I came week 3.
Yeah.
Week 3.
Yeah.
And that's difficult on any level, but I wasn't the only one. You had guys in and out, guys quitting here and there, and so you lose continuity with that. So we've had the same guys since the summer.
Yeah, it's been cool.
Pretty much, and we've added Rodney,
right,
which is a huge addition.
Oh yeah,
and a guy I truly look at as an equal. As far as knowledge and enthusiasm, and so that's a tremendous help. And I think that's what makes even Bradenton and the Soldiers, they have a lot of continuity. They're familiar with each other. Wolverines, a lot of these teams that are good, they keep the same kind of coaches around. They keep the same core players around. They might pick up 10 guys here and drop 10 guys there, but the core is there. So, yeah, I mean, it's looking up for us, but,
Yeah, it's not. In addition to being the best looking, I think we've been in the 3 years I've been there. This is easily the toughest company we've had in the 3 years I've been here too.
Well,
so that
2017 week 1, we were in that slobber knocker with the Raiders.
Yeah.
Remember
I remember that.
I remember that.
That was my first game with this
team. Such a tough game because their defense really at that time was just rocking, and I just offensively, it was a very frustrating game for me. Had we just scored, 10 points on offense, we win that game.
Yeah.
And the Raiders, of course, not that year, but the year after, go to the league championship.
Yeah, I didn't realize how good they were. I remember we played them, and I was just thinking, that was a classic, week 1 semi-pro game. Everybody's still trying to get their shit together and things like that. And then they go on, and even that year they were pretty okay.
They were like 8-2.
Yeah, I was like, wow. And we weren't that. We ended up finishing like 3-7 or something. I'm like, well, we almost beat those guys. We could have been a lot better than that.
Yeah, but that's sometimes the mental toughness in your team. Sometimes if the mental toughness is low in your team and the morale is low in your team, then you let those things affect you going throughout the season. Because we had a ton of games in that season. The X-Men. I mean. The Commandos we were even in a fight with. I think we were up on the Commandos at one point. You have to have the mental toughness to, get up after getting knocked down. And that year, I just, we had to be better, and we weren't. So.
Yeah, and that's the way it goes sometimes. This year's version of the Week 1 games, and it's really 1 week wrapped into 2 weeks, like we've talked about. We got the 2 kickoff classic games this week. And then the other remaining Week 1 games will be basically... Are they calling this Week 0, or is this officially Week 1?
This is Week 1. Okay, this is the FFA annual kickoff classic. They had it at one game at first. It usually was a rematch of the championship, but now they've extended it to one North and one South matchup.
On different days, so they don't conflict.
Well, this time I think they kind of wanted to make it a little special, kind of give each team its, I guess, prime time, exclusive, slot to where people from the North can go watch the Glads game, and then there's people obviously down in the southern areas who would like to go watch the Wolverines and the Bulldogs battle it out there at the Carter Park.
Yeah, and let's talk about it. Let's start with the one on the north side with Southwest Florida taking on Space Coast. Again, first time in the FFA for Space Coast. Southwest Florida coming off of a really tough loss and a surprising loss, which any loss would be for them. What do we see going into this one? Like, if you have a crystal ball right here.
I think that obviously both teams are coming actually off of losses that were...
That's true.
Not too, how can I put it? It's just not good, in terms of the scores. I know the Wolverines the Tar Heels had a tough time with the Wolverines at the Carter Park, and then the Gladiators, same thing.
About the preseason game, not a preseason game, a national championship game. But if you were, we would do point spread. Like if we were Vegas and we were setting spreads for these games, and we're not. But what would you make the line? This is how I am with gambling. Not that I gamble on FFA games. There is no action on those games. But if this was like something Vegas was posting a number, what do you think the number would be for this one here?
I don't even know where to begin with either game. I think, the Wolverines, I do feel like that game could potentially, just because of the familiarity with that park, I feel like, and maybe that's just me speaking from experience, I've seen them in full, just full octane offense, just going. And once they get going, once the swagger kicks in, once they know they got you
on that team, man.
Well, here's how you make a point spread. I'm not a Vegas insider, but here's how you make a point spread. You think of a number where it's not obvious, like, oh, I'm taking so and so with that number. And you try to find that middle ground where you're like, I gotta think about that, and it'd be about 50-50 on either side. So, for example, if I told you the line was Southwest Florida -3, you'd probably all take Southwest Florida. It's too low, right?
Yeah, probably. I would put that probably at 11.
Right. If I said it was Southwest Florida -20, you'd be like, oh, no, I'm taking Space Coast +20, no question.
Yeah.
So where's the number in the middle where you're like, is it 10? Is it 9.5? Is it 11, like you said?
It just seems so rare in these kind of games to see a really close game. It's so rare. Like, we played in a playoff game where it actually went to an overtime period.
The Cardinals, right?
And that's exciting football. You're kind of like, wow, we're going into extra time here. It's actually tied after 4 quarters.
Yeah, it rarely happens. You're right.
Most of these games are well decided, in one half. It's kind of like one team dominates, the other kind of just the ebb and flow of the sideline controls.
I mean, and parity is something that's elusive. Pro sports leagues go to great lengths to encourage parity for entertainment purposes. I mean, whether it's salary caps or whether it's, like in the NHL, the way if you lose in overtime, you still get a point. Right. That keeps everybody bunched up and still in the play. Things like that. They go to great lengths to do that. Obviously, we don't do that. We just play the games. And you're going to you get teams that can be, beating other teams 70-0. Although I remember several close games we've had, and sometimes that's just because both offenses struggle.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the scores last year here, week 1.
Yeah, look at week 1, because it's different in week 1 because everybody's offenses are still kind of behind the defenses, and I think that leads to closer games. That's anecdotal. That's just me thinking that. But
it's true.
And the week 1 matchup last year was that championship rematch. You had the Gladiators taking on the Raiders, and it was 28-22. So you look at that matchup, and you're like, that is that's your typical, you're excited, it's down to the wire, you're not bored and like, hey, I'm going to leave in the fourth quarter, I can't stand this. One of the games that was in the week 2, the Chargers took on the Makos, and the Makos won 12-0. So kind of your
that's the classic
defensive,
week 1,
just trying to get through it. Wolverines and Bulls, I mean, they had a classic there. Wolverines, the Bulls narrowly beat the Wolverines 30-26. So that's an exciting kind of game.
I think it really just matters on matchup.
Yeah.
And I think the Glads Tar Heels matchup is a good matchup. The Glads really count on their defense capitalizing on mistakes and special teams capitalizing on mistakes. And I don't know if the Tar Heels make a ton of special teams mistakes, but in that preseason game against the Wolverines, Matt Parsons did throw 5 interceptions. So if he does have a performance like that and they turn the ball over, then I think it's going to be a long night for the Tar Heels.
Oh, yeah, you do that against Southwest Florida.
Well, if you do that against pretty much anybody, not just Southwest, And then the Wolverines, Bulldogs, it's going to be, the Wolverines are used to the bright lights, and the Bulldogs are this new team melted together with a bunch of other good teams.
Total unknown, it's hard to say.
So are they going to be able to play under the bright lights? If I had to take my picks, I'm going with the runner-up and the champs. I'm going with
I mean, no
the
question.
Wolverines, probably in that game is probably going to be, I would say, a bigger spread. I would say probably 14 I would go. And then 11 on the Glads.
Okay. So there
that's
you go.
probably what I would do.
You got Nate the Greek. He's put his morning lines out. I want to see now. This is going to be interesting. We need to come back next week or whenever our next show is and actually see how well these lines were set. As the year goes on, you get more data about the teams, and the lines get tighter.
Right,
You're able to make more numbers.
Right. Yeah, and especially if parity does start.
Yeah, I hope it does.
Let's say the Tar Heels catch the Glads reeling, and then what? Then we're all looking at each other like, whoa.
Hard to imagine them losing 2 in a row. That's what I was saying earlier. It's just a hard thing to imagine. If they lose this game this weekend, it's going to definitely pop a lot of eyes. Like, what's going on here?
And what if the Bulldogs pull an upset? Now everything is crazy, and I think that would be great for the league, to be perfectly honest.
It really would. I mean,
I think the South is a lot of parity because the Wolverines are in tight games with the Bulls, and those two have played really good games here the last 2-3 years. When the Raiders were down there, they were all playing really close. Yeah. So I mean, and the Reapers. I mean, I think there's some good matchups down there that always seem a bit closer. Because I think that they're all closer in range. I think some of the teams in the North, you got the teams that are up here that just beat down on the teams that are a little lower.
It's more spread out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the South is a little bit more, they're all a little closer together.
Yeah.
So even the Chargers, who have a good quarterback.
They've gotten better, I mean, they got better every year. So.
And they got a good quarterback, and anytime you got a good quarterback, you got a chance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So...
Well, that's good. Hey, look, it's going to be fun. It's high time. There's been a lot of off-season practices, all this and that, preseason games. It's finally time to get going. Week 1 in the FFA this weekend. 2 games, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and then, of course, the next week will be all the other teams in action that didn't play this weekend are going to be playing then. So we got a practice tomorrow. We got another one next Thursday. We got West Coast coming up in the opener, which is going to be a lot of fun. Of course, we've had Troy Ruthrup on this show, the head coach of West Coast. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that whole game. Thank you guys for coming down here to South Tampa.
Dude, thanks for having us, man.
If anybody needs parking for Gasparilla or anything like that, like I said, I'll see you guys on Saturday too. If you
all right.
And are you going, or are you? Because you've been before.
No, I don't think I'm. I don't think I'm going to go. Not for any reason other than I just maybe don't want to deal with the crazy.
Yeah, you've been. This is your first one,
right?
Andy,
I've never gone.
I'm kind of jealous though. Like I said, I mean, it's something that I wish I could go back and do for the first time. I've been doing it since I was a little kid, so I don't even remember what my first one is. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks to head coach Nate Barlow, Andy Villamarzo. I'm Bobby Fenton. That is FFA Today, episode number 7. We'll be back with the next one whenever that is. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, good morning, good afternoon, good night, and remember, the FFA, the league that delivers.
Woo!
I like that.